Lady Catherine Ashworth pressed her gloved hand against the cold stone wall of the Duke of Ravensholm's library and held her breath. The scandal sheets would be delivered within the hour. Her heart hammered as she thought of the headlines that would destroy her family's reputation forever. She had caused this mess, and now she needed a way out before London society learned the truth. The massive oak doors creaked open. Catherine ducked behind a towering bookshelf as heavy footsteps echoed across the marble floor. She recognized that confident stride. Alexander Blackwood, the Duke of Ravensholm, had returned from his morning ride earlier than expected. "Jenkins, send word to my solicitor." The Duke's deep voice carried through the quiet room. "I need to review the marriage settlements again. The Pemberton girl will not suit after all." Catherine's eyes widened. The most eligible bachelor in England was calling off his engagement to Lady Margaret Pemberton. The gossips would have a field day with this news on top of everything else. She tried to creep toward the window, but her silk slipper caught on the Persian rug. A small decorative vase toppled from a side table and crashed to the floor. "Who goes there?" The Duke's voice turned sharp with authority. Catherine froze. There was nowhere to hide. She stepped out from behind the bookshelf, her chin raised despite the burning embarrassment in her cheeks. "Your Grace." She dropped into a perfect curtsy, though her hands trembled slightly. "I apologize for the intrusion. I was looking for a book." Alexander Blackwood stared at her with those piercing grey eyes that had made half the debutantes in London swoon. His dark hair was still slightly windswept from his ride, and his powerful frame filled out his riding clothes in a way that made Catherine's pulse quicken despite her current predicament. "Lady Catherine Ashworth." His voice held a note of surprise. "I was not aware you had an appointment to use my library." "I do not." She lifted her chin higher. "I came through the garden entrance. Your footman said you were not receiving calls this morning." "Indeed I was not." He moved closer, his boots clicking against the floor. "Yet here you are. Might I ask what book requires such desperate measures to obtain?" Heat flooded Catherine's face. She could hardly tell him she had been hiding from her own scandal. "A volume on botanical illustrations, for my sketching." "Ah." One dark eyebrow arched upward. "And you could not find suitable illustrations at Hookham's or Hatchard's?" "Your collection is renowned throughout London." The lies slipped easily from her lips, though she hated herself for it. Alexander studied her face with an intensity that made her want to squirm. "You seem distressed, Lady Catherine. Perhaps you would care to sit. I could ring for tea." "That is very kind, but I should return home." She turned toward the window, desperate to escape before he noticed how her hands shook. "I think not." His voice stopped her cold. "Not when you are clearly in some sort of trouble." Catherine's shoulders sagged. The kindness in his tone nearly undid her completely. "You would not understand, Your Grace." "Try me." She turned back to face him, struck by the genuine concern in his expression. Alexander Blackwood was known throughout society as a man of honor and integrity. He had inherited his title at 25 and had spent the last 7 years managing his vast estates with wisdom beyond his years. He was also devastatingly handsome, which only made this situation more mortifying. "There will be a scandal," she said quietly. "A terrible one. It will ruin my family's name and destroy any chance my younger sisters have of making good marriages." Alexander's expression grew serious. "What manner of scandal?" Catherine bit her lip. She could not tell him the whole truth. Not yet. "A compromising situation. The gossip sheets will have the story by this afternoon." "I see." He was quiet for a long moment, his grey eyes thoughtful. "And there is no way to prevent publication?" "None that I can see." Her voice cracked slightly. My father will be forced to send me to our estate in Yorkshire. I will live in exile while my sisters suffer for my mistakes." Alexander walked to the window and gazed out at his perfectly manicured gardens. Catherine watched the play of sunlight across his strong profile and wondered what thoughts were running through that brilliant mind. "There may be another solution," he said finally. "Your Grace," he turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "Marry me." Catherine stared at him in shock. "I beg your pardon." "Marry me," he repeated calmly. A wedding announcement would overshadow any scandal. The marriage of a duke commands far more attention than whatever gossip the sheets might print about an unmarried lady. But you barely know me." Catherine's heart raced so fast she felt dizzy. "And you are engaged to Lady Margaret." "I just called off that engagement, as you heard. Lady Margaret and I do not suit." He moved closer, his voice growing warmer. "You and I, however, have always gotten along well during the social season. We dance together often. Society would not be surprised by such a match." Catherine's mind reeled. Marriage to the Duke of Ravensholm would solve all her problems. Her family's reputation would be secure. Her sisters could make brilliant matches, but the guilt of deceiving him twisted like a knife in her chest. "Your Grace, I cannot accept such a generous offer. You do not know what you are proposing." "I am proposing marriage to a lady I respect and admire, a lady who is clearly in distress and in need of protection." His voice dropped to a gentle murmur. "I would be honored to provide that protection, Catherine." The way he said her name made her knees weak. But she had to be honest with him, even if it meant losing this miraculous chance at salvation. "There is something you should know," she began. The library doors burst open before she could continue. Catherine's lady's maid, Susan, rushed in with tears streaming down her face. "My lady, you must come at once. The scandal sheets, they are already being distributed. Your father is in such a rage, and your mother has taken to her bed with the vapors." Catherine's face went white. It was too late. The damage was done. Alexander stepped forward. "What exactly do these sheets say about Lady Catherine?" Susan bobbed a frightened curtsy. "Your Grace, they say she was caught in a compromising position with Mr. Edmund Hartwell in the Pembrokers' conservatory last night. They say she was kissing him." Catherine wanted the floor to open and swallow her whole. Alexander's face had gone completely blank, which somehow seemed worse than anger would have been. "I see," he said quietly. "Your Grace, I can explain. There is no need." His voice was carefully controlled. "The offer stands. We will announce our engagement immediately. The wedding will take place by special license within the week." Catherine stared at him in amazement. "But now you know the nature of the scandal. Surely you cannot still wish to—" "My decision remains unchanged." He turned to Susan. "Please inform Lady Catherine's parents that I will call upon them within the hour to request her hand in marriage. The engagement will be announced in tomorrow's papers." Susan curtsied again and hurried out, clearly relieved to escape the tension in the room. Catherine looked up at Alexander with tears in her eyes. Why would you still offer for me when you know what people are saying?" "Because you need protection, and I am in a position to provide it." His expression softened slightly. "And because I suspect there is more to this story than what appears in the gossip sheets." He was right, of course. There was so much more to the story, but Catherine could not bring herself to tell him the truth, not when he was being so impossibly noble and generous. "You are too kind, Your Grace." "Alexander," he corrected gently. "If we are to be married, you should use my given name." Alexander, She tested the name on her lips and felt a flutter of something dangerous in her chest. "I promise I will be a good wife to you. I will not embarrass you further. I have no doubt of that." He moved to his desk and pulled out a sheet of fine paper. "Now, let me compose a note to my solicitor. We have a wedding to arrange." As Alexander bent over his desk, Catherine studied his profile and wondered how she had gotten so lucky. Or perhaps lucky was not the right word, given that she was trapping an innocent man in marriage through her own deception. The truth was far worse than what the scandal sheets reported. She had not been caught kissing Edmund Hartwell in the conservatory. She had been blackmailing him. Catherine had discovered that Edmund, a married man and pillar of society, had been embezzling funds from a charity for orphaned children. When she confronted him with the evidence, he had grabbed her wrists and tried to force himself on her. She had managed to escape, but not before several people witnessed what appeared to be a romantic encounter. The real scandal was not that she had been compromised. The real scandal was that she had been gathering evidence of Edmund's crimes for weeks, sneaking into his office and copying documents. If that truth came out, she would be branded as a thief and a spy. Her family would be ruined beyond redemption. But now she was going to marry the Duke of Ravensholm, and none of it would matter. Alexander's reputation and social standing would protect her and her family from any future accusations. The guilt of deceiving such a good man was almost unbearable, but she had come too far to turn back now. "Catherine?" Alexander's voice drew her from her troubled thoughts. "Yes, I have been thinking about the arrangements. A small ceremony would be best, given the circumstances. Just our immediate families and a few close friends." "Of course. Whatever you think is appropriate." He set down his pen and looked at her directly. "I want you to know that this marriage will be what we make of it. I hope that in time we might find genuine affection for one another." Catherine's heart clenched. He was offering her everything she had ever dreamed of, and she was repaying his kindness with lies. "I hope so too," she whispered. Alexander smiled then, the first genuine smile she had seen from him that morning. It transformed his austere features and reminded her why half the ladies in London were half in love with him. "Good. Then let us begin, as we mean to go on." He offered her his arm. "Shall I escort you home? I imagine your parents are eager to hear the news." Catherine took his arm, acutely aware of the strength beneath the fine wool of his coat. "They will be surprised, but pleased, I hope." "Oh yes, very pleased. Any parent would be thrilled to see their daughter married to a duke, scandal or no scandal." As they walked through the corridors of Ravensholm House, Catherine tried to memorize every detail. The oil paintings of Alexander's ancestors, the gleaming marble floors, the crystal chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds. Soon this would all be hers. She would be the Duchess of Ravensholm. If only she deserved it. Alexander's carriage was waiting in the circular drive, his coat of arms emblazoned on the glossy black doors. A liveried footman helped Catherine into the plush interior while Alexander gave instructions to his driver. "The Ashworth residence on Grosvenor Square," he said as he settled beside her. The carriage lurched into motion, and Catherine found herself acutely aware of Alexander's presence beside her. He smelled of sandalwood and leather, and the warmth of his body made her skin tingle in the most inappropriate way. "Are you nervous?" he asked quietly. "Terrified," she admitted. "Of marriage or of your father's reaction?" "Both." She twisted her gloves in her lap. "My father has a terrible temper when roused, and this scandal will be forgotten within a fortnight once our marriage is announced." Alexander's voice was confident and reassuring. "Trust me, Catherine, everything will be well." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust in his strength and certainty, but the weight of her deception pressed down on her like a stone. The carriage rolled to a stop in front of the Ashworth family's elegant townhouse. Catherine could see the curtains twitching in the front windows. Half of London probably already knew about the scandal and would be watching to see what happened next. Alexander helped her down from the carriage, his hands strong and warm around her waist. For just a moment, she allowed herself to imagine that this was real, that he truly wanted to marry her for love rather than duty. The front door opened before they could knock. Higgins, the family's elderly butler, looked harried and distressed. "Lady Catherine, His Grace," he said with a bow. "Your parents are waiting in the drawing room." Catherine's stomach clenched with dread. Her father's voice carried through the closed doors, raised in anger. Her mother's softer tones tried to soothe him, but Lord Ashworth was not a man easily calmed when his family's honor was at stake. "Perhaps I should see them alone first," Catherine said. "Absolutely not." Alexander's voice was firm. "We face this together." He offered her his arm again, and she drew strength from his solid presence. Together they walked toward the drawing room where her fate would be decided. Higgins announced them, and the arguing voices fell silent. Catherine's parents looked up from where they sat near the fireplace, her mother pale and red-eyed, her father's face dark with fury. "Catherine." Lord Ashworth rose to his feet, his voice booming through the room. "How dare you show your face here after the disgrace you have brought upon this family? Father, please, do not speak." He pointed an accusing finger at her. "The entire town is talking about your shameful behavior, kissing that married scoundrel Hartwell like a common strumpet." Catherine flinched as if he had struck her. Beside her, Alexander stiffened. "Lord Ashworth," Alexander said, his voice cutting through the older man's tirade like a blade, "I suggest you moderate your tone when speaking to my future wife." The silence that followed was so complete that Catherine could hear the clock ticking on the mantelpiece. "Your future wife?" Lady Ashworth whispered. "Indeed." Alexander moved slightly in front of Catherine, as if shielding her from her father's anger. "I have come to request Lady Catherine's hand in marriage. We will wed by special license within the week." Lord Ashworth's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Your Grace, surely you cannot be serious. After what has happened? What has happened is that your daughter has been the victim of malicious gossip. As her husband, I will ensure that such gossip never troubles her again." Catherine's heart swelled with gratitude and something deeper. Alexander was defending her even though he barely knew her, even though she had brought scandal to his door. This is most unexpected," Lady Ashworth said faintly. She looked as if she might swoon again. "But welcome, I hope." Alexander's voice was warmer now, more conciliatory. "I have long admired your daughter. This situation merely hastened a proposal I had been contemplating for some time." Catherine stared at him in surprise. Had he truly been thinking of proposing to her, or was this simply a kind lie to smooth the way with her parents? Lord Ashworth sank back into his chair, looking dazed. "The Duke of Ravensholm wishes to marry our Catherine. If you will give your consent," Alexander said formally, "I can offer her the protection of my name and position. The scandal will be forgotten once our marriage is announced." "Yes," Lord Ashworth said quickly. "Yes, of course you have my consent, my blessing. Catherine she is most fortunate in your regard." Catherine wanted to laugh at the sudden change in her father's demeanor. One moment she was a disgrace to the family name, and the next she was most fortunate indeed. "Thank you, sir." Alexander bowed formally. "I will have my solicitor call upon yours tomorrow to discuss the settlements." Of course, of course." Lord Ashworth was practically rubbing his hands together with glee. A duke for a son-in-law would elevate the entire family's social standing beyond their wildest dreams. Lady Ashworth rose from her chair and crossed to Catherine, tears streaming down her face. "My dear girl, I cannot believe it. The Duke of Ravensholm." Catherine accepted her mother's embrace, though she felt like a fraud. Her parents were so happy, so relieved to see the scandal transformed into triumph. If only they knew the truth. "When will the wedding take place?" Lady Ashworth asked. "Saturday," Alexander replied. "I have already arranged for the special license. The ceremony will be held at St. George's, Hanover Square." "So soon?" Lady Ashworth looked flustered. "There is so much to arrange. The dress, the flowers, the wedding breakfast." "A small ceremony," Alexander said gently. "Given the circumstances, we thought it best to keep the celebration modest." Of course. Lady Ashworth was already making mental lists. "I must send word to the dressmaker immediately, and we must inform your sisters, Catherine. They will be so excited." Catherine's younger sisters, twins aged 19, were currently at their aunt's house in Bath. They would indeed be excited to learn their sister was marrying a duke. It would improve their own matrimonial prospects considerably. "I should take my leave," Alexander said. "There are arrangements to be made." He turned to Catherine and lifted her gloved hand to his lips. "Until tomorrow, my dear." The touch of his lips through the thin leather sent shivers up Catherine's arm. She watched him bow formally to her parents and stride from the room with that confident grace that marked him as born to command. As soon as the front door closed behind him, her parents turned to her with faces full of questions. "How long has the Duke been courting you?" her mother demanded. "You never said a word." "He has not been courting me," Catherine said truthfully. "This proposal was unexpected." "But surely there were signs," Lady Ashworth pressed. "He danced with you several times this season, and he always seemed to seek you out at parties." "Had he?" Catherine tried to remember their interactions during the social season. Alexander had indeed danced with her more than once, and he had always been kind and attentive when they spoke. But she had attributed that to good manners rather than romantic interest. "The Duke is a gentleman," she said carefully. "He saw that I was in distress and offered assistance. Assistance in the form of marriage to the most eligible bachelor in England," her father said with satisfaction. "You have done very well for yourself, Catherine. Very well indeed." Catherine excused herself and fled to her room, unable to bear any more of her parents' delight. She needed time to think, to process what had just happened. Her room overlooked the garden, and she stood at the window watching the sun set behind the elm trees. In just 5 days, she would be married to Alexander Blackwood. She would be a duchess, with all the privileges and responsibilities that entailed. But she would also be living a lie. A soft knock at her door interrupted her brooding. "Come in." Susan entered with a tea tray, her face still showing signs of her earlier distress. "I brought you some tea, my lady, and there are letters." Catherine accepted the cup gratefully. The hot liquid helped steady her nerves. "Letters? 3 of them came while you were in the drawing room." Susan held out the small stack of sealed papers, one from Lady Margaret Pemberton, one from your friend Miss Whitmore, and one with no name on it. Catherine's blood ran cold at the mention of the anonymous letter. She took the 3 envelopes with hands that trembled only slightly. "That will be all, Susan. Thank you." The maid curtsied and left. Catherine stared at the letters, dreading what they might contain. She opened Lady Margaret's first, expecting recriminations about stealing her fiancé. Instead, she found only relief and gratitude. "My dear Catherine," the letter began, I have just heard the most wonderful news about your engagement to the Duke of Ravensholm. I hope you will not think me indelicate when I say that I am vastly relieved. His Grace and I would not have suited, and I confess I was dreading our wedding day. You have saved us both from a marriage that would have made neither of us happy. I wish you every joy in your union, and hope we may continue as friends." Catherine set the letter aside with surprise and a small measure of relief. At least she had not made an enemy of Lady Margaret. Miss Whitmore's letter was full of excitement and congratulations, with many underlined words and exclamation points. Her friend was clearly thrilled by the news and full of questions about the courtship. The third letter made Catherine's hands shake as she broke the plain wax seal. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the words made her stomach lurch with fear. "Lady Catherine," it read, "your engagement to the Duke is most convenient, but it does not change what I know about your activities. The evidence you stole from Mr. Hartwell's office is still missing, and certain parties are most eager to retrieve it. Your new husband's reputation will not protect you if that evidence surfaces in the wrong hands. We must meet to discuss terms. Tomorrow at midnight, the old chapel in Ravensholm's grounds. Come alone, or face the consequences." The letter was unsigned, but Catherine had no doubt who had sent it. Someone knew about her investigation into Edmund Hartwell's embezzlement. Someone who wanted the evidence destroyed, or, more likely, wanted to use it for their own purposes. Catherine's hands trembled as she reread the threatening words. Her marriage to Alexander was supposed to solve all her problems, not create new ones, but now it seemed her past was determined to follow her into her new life. She walked to her writing desk and pulled out the small leather portfolio hidden in the secret compartment. Inside were copies of all the documents she had taken from Edmund's office: bank records, forged signatures, falsified charity accounts, enough evidence to see him transported or hanged for theft. But if this evidence came to light, questions would be asked about how she had obtained it. The scandal of her breaking into a gentleman's private office would make the current gossip seem trivial by comparison. Catherine locked the portfolio back in its hiding place and tried to think. She could not meet this mysterious correspondent alone. But she could not ignore the threat either. Her marriage to Alexander had made the stakes even higher. If she was exposed now, his reputation would be damaged along with hers. There was only one solution. She had to find a way to resolve this situation before her wedding day. She owed Alexander that much, at least. The next morning brought a flurry of activity as preparations for the wedding began in earnest. Alexander called early to escort Catherine to the dressmaker, where she was fitted for a hastily altered gown of ivory silk. "You look beautiful," he said quietly as she emerged from the fitting room. Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. The admiration in his grey eyes seemed genuine, and for a moment she allowed herself to believe that this marriage might become something real and lasting. "Thank you," she murmured, smoothing the rich fabric over her hips. "It is a lovely gown." "The gown is lovely," Alexander corrected, "but it is the lady wearing it who is beautiful." Their eyes met in the large mirror, and Catherine felt her breath catch. There was something in his expression, something warm and possessive, that made her pulse race. Perhaps he was not as indifferent to her as she had assumed. After the dressmaker, they visited the jeweler to select a wedding ring. Alexander insisted she choose something she liked, rather than simply accepting a family heirloom. "This one," Catherine said, pointing to a delicate band set with small diamonds. "It is perfect." Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger to check the fit, his touch sending tingles up her arm. "It suits you," he said softly. "Elegant and refined, but not ostentatious." Catherine stared down at the ring, trying to memorize the feeling of wearing it. In just 3 days, she would wear it permanently as the Duchess of Ravensholm. That afternoon, Alexander's solicitor called to finalize the marriage settlements. Catherine sat quietly while her father and the legal men discussed her dowry and pin money. The amounts being discussed were staggering. Alexander was being extraordinarily generous, settling an income on her that would make her independently wealthy. "Your Grace is most kind," her father said with obvious satisfaction. "Lady Catherine will be my wife," Alexander replied simply. "I want her to have every comfort and security." After the men concluded their business, Alexander asked to speak with Catherine privately. They walked to the small conservatory at the back of the house, where late roses bloomed in defiance of the approaching autumn. "I wanted to discuss our living arrangements after the wedding," Alexander said. "Ravensholm House here in London is quite grand, but I spend most of my time at Ravensholm Castle in Derbyshire. I hope you will not find country life too dull." "I love the country," Catherine said truthfully. "London society can be exhausting." "Indeed it can." Alexander plucked a yellow rose and offered it to her. "I think you will like the castle. It has beautiful gardens and an excellent library. There are also several charming villages on the estate where you might involve yourself in charitable works if such things interest you." Catherine accepted the rose, her fingers brushing his as she took it. "They do interest me very much." "Good. I had hoped we might work together on some of the local projects. The tenant schools need improvement, and there is always more to be done for the poor." The irony was not lost on Catherine. Here was Alexander talking about helping the poor, while she possessed evidence that Edmund Hartwell had been stealing from orphaned children. She should tell Alexander about the embezzlement. He would know what to do with the information, but revealing what she knew would mean confessing how she had obtained the evidence. She could not bring herself to shatter his good opinion of her so close to their wedding day. "That sounds wonderful," she said instead. Alexander smiled and moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I hope you know that I do not enter this marriage lightly, Catherine. I intend to be a good husband to you, and I intend to be a good wife," she whispered. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. His grey eyes darkened as they dropped to her lips, and she felt herself swaying toward him. But then he stepped back, his expression carefully controlled once more. "Until tomorrow," he said formally. Catherine watched him leave, her heart pounding with equal parts anticipation and dread. Tomorrow was Thursday. On Friday, she would have to meet the mysterious letter writer at the chapel. On Saturday, she would marry Alexander, unless the events of Friday night destroyed everything first. That evening, Catherine pleaded a headache and retired early to her room. She needed to plan her strategy for the meeting at the chapel. Whoever had sent that letter clearly knew about her investigation into Edmund's crimes, but how much did they actually know, and what did they want? She considered taking the evidence to the meeting and simply handing it over, but something told her that would not be the end of it. Once someone had leverage over her, they would use it again and again. No, she needed a different approach. She needed to find out who was behind the blackmail attempt and what their true motives were. Catherine spent most of the night planning, and by morning she had decided on a course of action. It was risky, but it was the only way she could see to protect both herself and Alexander. Friday dawned grey and drizzling, matching Catherine's mood perfectly. She went through the motions of her usual routine, taking breakfast with her parents and receiving well-wishers who called to congratulate her on her engagement. But her mind was elsewhere, focused on the meeting that would take place in just a few hours. Alexander arrived in the afternoon to escort her to the final wedding rehearsal at St. George's. The ceremony would be small but formal, with only immediate family and a few close friends in attendance. As they practiced the ancient words of the marriage service, Catherine felt the weight of her deception more keenly than ever. Tomorrow she would promise to love, honor, and obey Alexander Blackwood. She would vow to be faithful and true, but she was walking into their marriage with secrets that could destroy them both. "You seem distracted," Alexander murmured as they left the church. "Wedding nerves," Catherine lied. "Understandable." He handed her into his carriage. "Perhaps an early evening would be wise. Tomorrow will be a long day." Catherine nodded, though she knew sleep would be impossible. In just a few hours, she would sneak out of her family's house and make her way to the abandoned chapel on Alexander's estate. The Ravens' home grounds were vast, stretching for miles beyond the main house. The old chapel sat in a grove of ancient oak trees, built by some long-dead duke as a private place of worship for the family. It had been abandoned for decades, used now only by lovers seeking privacy and children playing at ghosts. Catherine had visited it once, during a house party the previous summer. She remembered the crumbling stone walls and broken stained glass windows, the air of melancholy that hung over the place like fog. It would be the perfect location for a clandestine meeting. As her family's carriage rolled through the London streets toward home, Catherine finalized her plans. She would leave the house at 11 o'clock, using the servants' entrance to avoid detection. Her horse was stabled nearby, and she was an accomplished rider. She could reach the chapel by midnight easily. The question was whether she would return home safely afterward. Dinner that evening was a celebration, with champagne and toasts to Catherine's future happiness. Her sisters had returned from Bath that afternoon, full of excitement about the wedding and their own improved prospects as sisters to a duchess. "You are so fortunate," Lydia gushed. "The Duke of Ravensholm is the handsomest man in England, and the richest," added Sophia practically. "You will never want for anything, Cathy." Catherine smiled and accepted their congratulations, but her mind was on the clock ticking steadily toward midnight. As soon as the family retired, she would begin her dangerous gambit. At 10:30 she pleaded exhaustion and went to her room. Susan helped her out of her evening gown and into her nightdress, then was dismissed for the evening. Catherine waited until the house was completely quiet before rising and dressing in her darkest riding habit. She had considered bringing a weapon, but decided it would only create more danger. Instead, she armed herself with determination and the hope that her unknown correspondent could be reasoned with. The servants' stairs creaked ominously as she made her way to the ground floor. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain it would wake the entire household. But she reached the garden door without incident and slipped out into the foggy London night. The streets were nearly deserted at this hour, with only the occasional hackney cab or late-night reveller to break the silence. Catherine kept to the shadows as she made her way to the mews where her horse was stabled. Buttercup was a gentle mare, patient and sure-footed. Catherine had ridden her since she was a girl, and the horse nickered softly in recognition as she approached the stall. "Quiet, sweetheart," Catherine whispered as she saddled the mare with trembling hands. "We have important business tonight." The ride to Derbyshire would normally take several hours, but Catherine knew a shortcut through Hyde Park and across the countryside. She urged Buttercup into a steady canter, praying that the fog would provide cover and that no highwaymen were abroad this night. The city gave way to rolling hills and dark forests. Catherine had always loved riding at night, but tonight every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Her imagination conjured footpads and worse behind every tree. But Buttercup was steady and true, carrying her safely through the darkness toward whatever fate awaited at the chapel. The grounds of Ravensholm Castle appeared through the mist like something from a Gothic novel. The main house loomed in the distance, its windows dark except for a few scattered lights where servants kept late vigils. Catherine guided Buttercup toward the old chapel, her pulse quickening with each step. The ancient oaks that surrounded the building seemed to whisper warnings in the wind, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. She dismounted at the edge of the grove and tied Buttercup's reins to a sturdy branch. The mare would wait patiently for her return, assuming she lived to make one. The chapel door stood slightly ajar, and faint candlelight flickered within. Catherine took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold into her uncertain future. "Lady Catherine," a figure emerged from the shadows near the altar. "How good of you to come." Catherine's blood froze as she recognized the voice. "Mr. Hartwell." Edmund Hartwell stepped into the circle of candlelight, his once handsome face twisted with desperation and malice. His clothes were rumpled, his hair unkempt. He looked like a man on the edge of complete ruin. "Surprised to see me?" he asked with a bitter laugh. "I imagine you thought your marriage to the Duke would end our association. What do you want?" Catherine kept her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "What I have always wanted. The return of the documents you stole from my office." His eyes glittered dangerously in the candlelight. "You have caused me considerable trouble, Lady Catherine. My wife has left me. My creditors are demanding payment, and certain business associates are most displeased with my failure to deliver promised funds." Catherine's mind raced. Edmund's business associates could only mean his partners in the embezzlement scheme. There were others involved, which made the situation even more dangerous than she had realized. "I do not know what documents you mean," she said carefully. "Do not play games with me," Edmund's voice echoed off the stone walls. "I know you were in my office. I know you copied the charity accounts and the bank records. Without those documents, I cannot complete certain transactions that are vital to my survival." "You mean you cannot continue stealing from orphan children?" Edmund's face darkened with rage. "Those brats will survive without a few pounds here and there. I have expenses to cover, debts to pay. The charity has more money than it knows what to do with." Catherine stared at him in disgust. "You are stealing from the most vulnerable people in society, and you feel no shame at all. Shame is a luxury I cannot afford." Edmund moved closer, his eyes wild. "Give me the documents, Catherine, or I will ensure that your new husband learns exactly what kind of woman he is marrying. Alexander already knows about the scandal you created," Catherine said with more confidence than she felt. "He does not care, but does he know about your nighttime visits to my office? Does he know how you picked the lock and rifled through my private papers like a common thief?" Edmund's smile was cruel. "I think the Duke of Ravensholm might find such behavior rather unbecoming in a wife." Catherine's heart sank. Edmund was right. Alexander might forgive her for being caught in a compromising position, but breaking and entering was a serious crime. If Edmund could prove what she had done, it would destroy her reputation completely. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked quietly. "A simple exchange. The documents for my silence about your criminal activities." Edmund pulled a pistol from his coat and pointed it directly at her heart. "And lest you think to refuse, I am prepared to ensure your cooperation by any means necessary." Catherine stared at the gun with surprising calm. She had expected this confrontation to be dangerous. At least now she knew exactly where she stood. "The documents are not here," she said. "Then we will retrieve them together. My carriage is waiting outside. If I leave with you, people will notice my absence. There will be questions. Not if you leave a note explaining that you have reconsidered the marriage and decided to flee rather than go through with it." Edmund's eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. "Your reputation will be ruined. But you will be alive. Refuse to cooperate, and you will be found dead in this chapel tomorrow morning. A tragic accident, perhaps, or suicide brought on by shame and despair. Catherine felt trapped. If she went with Edmund, she might be able to retrieve the documents and buy his silence, but she would be completely at his mercy, and she had no reason to trust him to keep his word. On the other hand, if she refused, he would likely shoot her and search for the documents himself. Her family would be destroyed by the scandal of her death, and Alexander would be left to wonder what terrible secret had driven his bride to such desperate measures. "Very well," she said finally. "I will come with you." Edmund's smile was triumphant and chilling. "I thought you might see reason. Now, move toward the door." Slowly, Catherine began walking toward the chapel entrance, her mind racing. She needed to find a way to escape, or to signal for help. But the night was dark and silent, and she was completely alone. As they reached the doorway, a new voice cut through the darkness like a blade. "I think not, Hartwell." Alexander Blackwood stepped out of the shadows near the chapel entrance, his face set in lines of cold fury. In his hands was a pistol that dwarfed Edmund's weapon, and his grey eyes promised death to anyone who threatened what belonged to him. "Your Grace," Edmund stammered, swinging his gun toward this new threat. This is a private matter. Nothing concerning my betrothed is private from me." Alexander's voice was deadly quiet. "Lower your weapon and step away from Lady Catherine." "I cannot do that." Edmund's hand shook as he tried to keep both Alexander and Catherine covered with his single pistol. "She has something that belongs to me. She has nothing that belongs to a thief and a scoundrel." Alexander took a step closer, his own weapon never wavering. "But you have committed several crimes tonight. Threatening a lady, pointing a weapon at her, attempting to kidnap her. Any one of those offenses could see you hanged." Catherine watched in amazement as Alexander stalked closer like a predator approaching wounded prey. This was not the polite, controlled gentleman she had known in London society. This was a man capable of violence, a man protecting what he considered his own. "How did you know to come here?" she whispered. "Your maid was worried when she could not find you this morning," Alexander replied without taking his eyes off Edmund. "She mentioned the mysterious letter you received yesterday. It was not difficult to deduce that someone was attempting to use the scandal for their own purposes." Edmund laughed wildly. "You think you know everything, Your Grace. You think your precious bride is some innocent victim. Ask her about the documents she stole from my office. Ask her about the illegal activities she has been pursuing for weeks." Alexander's jaw tightened, but his aim never wavered. "Lower your weapon, Hartwell. This is your final warning. She is a thief." Edmund shouted, "A criminal. She broke into my private office and stole confidential papers." "To expose your embezzlement of charity funds," Catherine said quietly. "To stop you from stealing money meant for orphaned children." The silence that followed was broken only by the wind sighing through the oak trees. Alexander looked at Catherine with an expression she could not read. "Is this true?" he asked. Catherine lifted her chin proudly. "Yes. I discovered that Mr. Hartwell was falsifying the accounts for the Children's Benevolent Society. I obtained evidence of his crimes by breaking into his office." "Yes." Alexander nodded slowly, as if he were filing this information away for later consideration. Then he turned back to Edmund with renewed focus. "So you are not only a thief, but a thief who preys on children. How utterly contemptible." Edmund's face twisted with desperation. "The law will not distinguish between her crimes and mine. She is as guilty as I am, perhaps," Alexander said calmly. "But she is under my protection, and you are not." What happened next occurred so quickly that Catherine barely saw it. Alexander lunged forward, striking Edmund's gun hand with the butt of his own pistol. Edmund's weapon discharged harmlessly into the air as it flew from his grasp. Before Edmund could recover, Alexander had him pinned against the chapel wall with the muzzle of the pistol pressed to his throat. "You have a choice," Alexander said, conversationally. "You can return to London tonight and disappear from England forever. Find passage to America or the continent. Change your name and start a new life somewhere far from here." "And if I refuse?" Edmund gasped. "Then I will see you hanged for embezzlement, attempted kidnapping, and threatening my future wife." Alexander's voice was pleasant, as if he were discussing the weather. "I have considerable influence with the magistrates. They will be very interested in the evidence Lady Catherine has gathered." Edmund's face went white. You would use stolen documents in a court of law." "I would use any means necessary to protect what is mine." Alexander's eyes were cold as winter ice. "What will it be, Hartwell? Exile or the gallows?" "Exile," Edmund whispered. "I choose exile." Alexander stepped back, but kept his pistol trained on the broken man. "Wise decision. You have until dawn to be aboard a ship, leaving English waters. If you are seen in England after sunrise, I will hunt you down personally." Edmund stumbled toward the chapel door, then turned back with a last desperate appeal. "The documents, Catherine. I still need—" "The documents will be turned over to the proper authorities." Alexander cut him off. "The embezzled funds will be returned to the charity, and the children you robbed will receive justice." Edmund's shoulders sagged in defeat. "You have ruined me completely. You ruined yourself the moment you decided to steal from orphans." Alexander's voice held no pity. "Go, now, before I change my mind about letting you live." Edmund fled into the night, leaving Catherine alone with the man she was to marry in less than 12 hours. Alexander holstered his pistol and turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the flickering candlelight. "Well," he said quietly, "it seems we have much to discuss." Catherine's knees suddenly felt weak. As the adrenaline of the confrontation faded, she sank onto one of the broken stone benches, her hands shaking with delayed reaction. "I suppose you want to call off the wedding," she said dully. "Do I?" Alexander moved to stand before her, his grey eyes studying her face intently. "You broke into a man's office to steal documents, proving he was embezzling from a charity. You risked your reputation, your safety, and your family's honor to seek justice for children you do not even know." Catherine looked up at him in surprise. "You make it sound noble, but I am still a thief." "Are you?" Alexander sat beside her on the stone bench, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. "Or are you a woman with a strong sense of justice who was willing to take extraordinary risks to protect the innocent?" "The law would not see it that way. The law is not always just." Alexander's voice was thoughtful. "Sometimes individuals must act when the proper authorities will not." Catherine stared at him in amazement. "You are not angry." "I am furious," Alexander said calmly, "but not at you. I am angry that you felt you had to handle this situation alone. I am angry that Hartwell threatened you. I am angry that you were put in danger because you chose to do what was right. But I deceived you. I let you think the scandal was just about being caught in a compromising position when the truth was so much worse." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the flickering candles near the altar. "Catherine, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you not come to me when you discovered Hartwell's crimes? Why did you not ask for help?" Catherine felt tears prick at her eyes. "Because I barely knew you, because you were engaged to another woman, because ladies are not supposed to involve themselves in such matters, and because you thought I would not believe you, or would not care enough to act." She nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. Alexander turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face gently. "Catherine, I want you to understand something. When I offered to marry you yesterday, it was not purely from a sense of duty or honor. I have admired you for months, your intelligence, your kindness, your spirit. Learning about your efforts to expose Hartwell's crimes only increases my admiration." "Truly?" Catherine searched his face for any sign of deception. "Truly?" His thumbs brushed away the tears that had spilled down her cheeks. "You risked everything to protect children who had no one else to advocate for them. How could I be anything but proud to call such a woman my wife?" Catherine felt her heart swell with emotion, so intense it was almost painful. "I do not deserve your good opinion. Let me be the judge of that." Alexander's voice was tender. "Now, I think it is time we return to London. We have a wedding tomorrow, and I find myself very eager to make you my Duchess." He helped her to her feet and escorted her from the ruined chapel. Outside, his carriage waited alongside her patient mare. A groom took charge of Buttercup, while Alexander handed Catherine into the elegant vehicle. As they rolled through the pre-dawn darkness toward London, Catherine felt as if she were living in a dream. Just hours ago she had been terrified that her secrets would destroy any chance of happiness. Now she sat beside the man she was to marry, his strong hand holding hers, feeling more hopeful than she had in weeks. "Alexander," she said softly. "Yes, what will you do with the documents I gathered?" "Turn them over to a magistrate I trust, along with testimony about Hartwell's activities." His voice was firm. "The embezzled funds will be traced and returned to the charity. Justice will be served. And my part in obtaining the evidence." Alexander was quiet for a moment. "There are ways to present the information that will not implicate you directly. Let me handle the legal aspects." Catherine squeezed his hand gratefully. "Thank you. You need never thank me for protecting you, Catherine. It is my privilege and my duty as your husband." "We are not married yet," she pointed out. Alexander lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "A mere technicality. In my heart, you have been mine since the moment I saw you hiding in my library." The words sent warmth flooding through Catherine's entire body. "And am I yours? I mean, what do you think?" Catherine looked into his grey eyes and saw the answer there. She saw love and desire and a fierce protectiveness that took her breath away. "I think," she said carefully, "that I am falling in love with my future husband." Alexander's smile was brilliant in the dim light of the carriage. "Good, because I am already completely in love with my future wife." He leaned closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "May I kiss you, Catherine?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Yes." Alexander's lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. Catherine had been kissed before, but never like this, never with such tenderness and passion combined, never by a man who knew her secrets and loved her anyway. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I have wanted to do that for months," Alexander confessed. "Why did you not?" "Because you were not mine to kiss. But you will be, in just a few hours." The rest of the journey passed in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined on the carriage seat. Catherine watched the sun rise over the London rooftops and felt as if she were seeing the world with new eyes. She had expected to face her wedding day with guilt and trepidation. Instead, she felt only joy and anticipation. She was about to marry a man who knew the worst thing about her and loved her for it, rather than despite it. The carriage stopped outside her family's house as the servants were beginning their morning duties. Alexander escorted her to the door, where her worried parents waited in their night clothes. "Catherine, thank God you are safe." Lady Ashworth rushed forward to embrace her daughter. "When we could not find you this morning, We feared the worst. I am quite well, mother. Catherine accepted the embrace, then turned to her father. I apologize for causing such worry. There was a matter I needed to resolve before the wedding. Lord Ashworth looked as if he wanted to ask questions, but Alexander's presence seemed to remind him that his daughter was no longer entirely his responsibility. All is well now, Alexander said smoothly. The matter has been resolved to everyone's satisfaction. Good. Lord Ashworth still looked confused, but he was not inclined to press for details. The wedding is in just a few hours. Catherine, you must rest and prepare. Catherine nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted. The events of the night had taken their toll, and she needed sleep before facing the most important day of her life. Until this afternoon, Alexander said, lifting her hand to his lips once more. Until this afternoon, Catherine echoed. She watched him drive away, then went upstairs to rest before becoming the Duchess of Ravensholm. The wedding of Lady Catherine Ashworth to Alexander Blackwood, Duke of Ravensholm, was the talk of London society. Despite the hasty arrangements and small guest list, the ceremony at St. George's, Hanover Square, was elegant and moving. Catherine wore the ivory silk gown with her grandmother's pearls and a delicate veil of Brussels lace. She carried white roses from Alexander's conservatory, their sweet fragrance reminding her of their conversation in her family's garden just days before. As she walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her eyes were fixed on Alexander waiting at the altar. He looked magnificent in his formal wedding attire, his dark hair perfectly styled, his grey eyes warm with love and pride. When her father placed her hand in Alexander's, Catherine felt a sense of rightness that went soul deep. This was where she belonged. This was the man she was meant to spend her life with. The ancient words of the marriage service seemed to take on new meaning as they spoke their vows. When Alexander promised to love and cherish her, Catherine heard the deeper promise in his voice. He would protect her secrets, defend her choices, and stand by her side no matter what challenges they faced. When she promised to love, honor, and obey him, Catherine meant every word. She was giving herself completely to this man who had saved her from scandal and shown her what true love could be. The ring slid onto her finger with perfect ease, as if it had been made for her hand. Alexander's eyes never left her face as he spoke the final words that made her his wife. With this ring I thee wed, with my body I thee worship, and with all my worldly goods I thee endow. The words sent shivers of anticipation through Catherine's body. Tonight she would truly become Alexander's wife in every sense of the word. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, Alexander's kiss was brief but tender, a promise of the passion that would come later when they were alone. The wedding breakfast at Ravensholm House was a joyous affair, with toasts and congratulations from their families and friends. Catherine found herself laughing and smiling more than she had in weeks. The weight of her secrets finally lifted from her shoulders. Lady Margaret Pemberton was among the guests, and she embraced Catherine warmly. "I am so happy for you both," she said sincerely. "I can see that you and Alexander are perfectly suited." "Thank you," Catherine replied. "Your kindness means more than you know." As the afternoon wore on, Catherine found herself stealing glances at her new husband. Alexander was the perfect host, charming and attentive to their guests, but she caught him looking at her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Finally, as the sun began to set, it was time for the newlyweds to depart for their honeymoon. Alexander had arranged for them to spend a week at a private estate in the Lake District before returning to Ravensholm Castle. Catherine changed into a travelling dress of deep blue wool, her heart racing with anticipation and a little nervousness. She was a married woman now, with all the intimacies that implied. Susan helped her pack a small valise with essential items, including a beautiful nightgown of ivory silk that had been part of her hastily assembled trousseau. You look radiant, my lady, Susan said with tears in her eyes. His Grace is a very fortunate man. I am the fortunate one, Catherine replied truthfully. Alexander was waiting in the carriage when she came downstairs, having already said goodbye to his family and hers. As the vehicle pulled away from Ravensholm House, Catherine felt as if she were leaving her old life behind forever. How do you feel, Your Grace? Alexander asked with a smile. Your Grace? Catherine laughed. That will take some getting used to. You are the Duchess of Ravensholm now. It suits you. Catherine settled back against the plush cushions, still amazed by the turn her life had taken. Just a week ago, she had been hiding in Alexander's library, terrified of the scandal that threatened to destroy her family. Now she was married to the man of her dreams, secure in his love and protection. Alexander, she said softly. Yes, my dear. I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of your trust and love. Alexander reached for her hand, lifting it to press a kiss to her wedding ring. You already have, Catherine. You already have. As their carriage rolled through the English countryside toward their honeymoon destination, Catherine reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. Her attempt to seek justice for exploited children had led to scandal, which had led to Alexander's proposal, which had led to love. Perhaps it was true that all things worked together for good for those who loved righteously. Catherine had risked everything to protect the innocent, and in return she had found the love of her life. The future stretched ahead of them, full of promise and possibility. There would be challenges, of course. Managing the vast Ravensholm estates, navigating the complexities of society as a duchess, perhaps raising children of their own someday. But Catherine felt ready for whatever lay ahead. She had Alexander's love to sustain her, and she had learned that she was stronger and braver than she had ever imagined. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Alexander pulled her closer to his side. I love you, Catherine Blackwood, Duchess of Ravensholm, and I love you, Alexander, with all my heart. The carriage carried them onward through the night, toward their new life together, toward a future built on love, trust, and the courage to fight for what was right. Catherine closed her eyes and smiled, secure in the knowledge that she had found her true home in the arms of the man who had offered her marriage to escape a scandal, never knowing that she was the one who had caused it. In the end, her secrets had not destroyed their love, but had revealed the depth of Alexander's character and the strength of their bond. Some scandals, Catherine reflected drowsily, led to the most wonderful outcomes of all. The end.